I call this one worldscape because there's no horizon line. It's what I call a found object. And there's a lot of found objects in 20th century art. It's one of the main things in 20th century art. And what this was an old tablecloth. It was one of those American tablecloths which had black and white checks on it. It had been on a table, and this is the underneath. On the table, in its real life, it had jars of jam, tomato ketchup, all sorts of things on it, which it perforated into the surface. So when I saw the other side, I saw the results of this, and it looked like a map of another world to me. So I called it worldscape. But people make the mistake when they find a found object. Finding it is the main thing. For God's sake, don't try to make it into art, because it'll destroy it. So what I did with this one, I said, I want to add to it, other than sticking it on a canvas. It's about twice that size. It's in my exhibition. What I said, well, how can I add to it, but not with a capital A? And I suddenly realised, if you go to the telephone book, and you're looking for Mr. Smith, amongst all the Mr. Smiths, the one you identify with, you put a ring round it, which means that's the one I want, okay? So I thought, well, look, what I should do is put rings and marks round the pieces I like best in the picture, and then I'm adding to it in its own terms. And I learned a lot from this particular picture. Next one is in the London Art Gallery. That is 3 panels. It's 15 feet long and it's 8 foot high. And it's 3 panels bolted together. I think the next slide you'll see me against it, so you'll get its scale. In this picture, I've tried to assimilate all I'd learned previously. The Celtic bit, the texture bit, the surface bit, the colour bit. And I like that range of colour because it doesn't, by that colour you can enjoy the calligraphy. If I pitch the colour up, you don't see the calligraphy. Well, to my mind, the calligraphy was the most important part. So I downed the colour, so that the hardest thing with doing that one was the white line. Getting that white line right. So it was part of it rather than not part of it. So that one is in the London Art Gallery. It's called Floating to Valhalla. There's a little figure in there somewhere, you can't see him there. But he's floating to Valhalla. And what I tried to do in that, I tried to take all the things, I did this about 20 years ago. But I tried to assimilate in my mind all that I'd learned and try to fetch the picture out of what I'd learned, like this. And also, it's my pictures, nobody else's. It's not copying somebody else. Next one, I think is the same one, and you'll get the idea of the scale. There it is. Now you get the idea of the scale. That's how my wife would like to lynch me, I think, like that. But that gives the scale. And look at the sand, and look at the marking in the sand. I had a marvellous time with that one. Throwing the sand on, even the cat joined me in, you know. Just kept digging. But then I made this shape there of shapes I'd found in the British Museum of Viking marks on stones. And I used so I tried to, as I said, assimilate all I'd learned into that. Next one, and then they start to change again. I found a whole lot of brown boards. I like the idea of drawing on brown boards, and I like the idea of the shape and the feeling of the board. And when you draw the line in, the paint runs into the wood. It's all about tactile things, tactile. I did a whole series of those, and there's a little one like that one on the wall next door. So these are the ones. I've got an exhibition coming off in London, in England, next year, and of things like this. are suddenly being discovered. Next one. It's about standing stones. There's another one. And you know, wood's marvellous so that I can put sand on, but it's rather marvellous if you just use sandpaper over part of the wood and leave the other part alone. It's subtle enough to make that subtle difference between one shape and another. And you know, and these are my clouds. They're not Constable clouds. They're not Turner clouds. They're not the Group of 7 clouds. They're my clouds. And the clouds that go with that picture. You know, and the clouds are placed to make a type of space. And then again, that's my background. The handwriting always comes in. Either it's brush marks, or it's scratch marks, or it's stain marks. But that's all part of my equilibrium. Next, that one is only 6 inches by 6. It's only about that big. But if you get the scale right, it's about how big it is, it's got its own scale. Some people can't get scale right. They do a big picture, they think they're going to get the scale. Sometimes the smallest thing can have scale. But the problem in the art game is to recognize it, to recognize scale. These were quite successful, these ones, they're little frames. Then again, I left the colour of the board for the clouds. And then I put sand on this side to make the difference between the sand and the wood. And they've got a vitality, they're alive. Next. In a way, it's like, when you mix shapes like that, it's like playing a Bach fugue. You know, I'm always impressed in the winter months when I look out the window and see the birds sitting on the telegraph wires. They look like music. And somehow the birds know. 3 together, 1 away, 2 together, 3 away. 3 together, 2 away. And suddenly, that's a Bach fugue. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Why can't a picture have a fugue in it? Why can't you overlap other things? Next. That's why I started a whole thing in Fanshawe, the only one in this part of the world, of recording studios for sound. It's the same thing. Next, that one has just been bought by a collector. That one is about 4 foot by 4. And you can see now they're my clouds, it's my interpretation of water. It's when I go up to Georgian Bay and see these things, and the marks on the rocks. And the hardest thing on that one was getting the right yellow. That's what I call a cold yellow. It's a cold one. It had to be a cold one to hold the blue. Now this picture, if you look at this picture, it's about those things. It's the blue that holds the clouds in check, and it's the yellow, cold yellow there, which keeps the other clouds in check. And it's the greys and the brown in the foreground that keeps the blue in check. So the space in that one is not done by perspective, it's done by colour, by making the colour work. There's another one with the same theme. These are 4 foot by 4, and this one's going into the Beaver Book collection in Fredericton. Then again, it's playing. That's like music connotations in the right-hand corner. And there's my old Viking thing coming again in the V on the black cloud. And the V keeps the cloud in check. Look at the space between the cloud on the left and the blue behind it. And look at how that blue keeps the orange sun in check. You see what I mean? One against the other. So I've now gone from drawn space to colour space. And that's what our generation is about. And next, I think there's one more, I think. You'll be relieved to know.